The stories contained in this podcast are the recollections of the guests we've invited onto the show. We are an outlet for people to share their truths, and we accept no legal responsibilities for the stories contained herein.
I'm Kendra Sheets.
And I'm Rich Gill.
And this is Enough, a podcast that aims to shine light into the darkened corners of the music industry while discussing the ways we can and should improve ourselves and, in turn, our community.
So, well, we're back.
Hi.
We're gone for a while, and now we're back. We said that we would only be focusing on interview episodes at the end of 2024. We were like, we're done with this 2 times a month kind of thing. But
we lasted not even a month.
No, we had a month break, and then we came back doing the exact same schedule as before. And that's mostly because so much has happened in the time since we recorded our very last episode of 2024 that we felt we had to do a subtext or two about the things that were going on to share with all of you. It's really important to take time to relish in a win when there is one, because in this realm, talking about what we do and talking to the people that we speak with, the wins seem really few and far between. So when there is one, I think it's really important to uplift that one. And that's why we're going to be discussing the news that broke in late December of last year, 2024. And that's the legal win for Gisele Pelicot.
So let's go over the basics of what exactly we're talking about with Gisele. She's a 72-year-old French woman who met her now ex-husband when she was 19 years old. They were married for more than 50 years. And her ex-husband has been found guilty of raping and drugging her. And on top of that, letting other men rape her as well. It's pretty fucking horrific stuff. The rapes occurred over a decade of time. And the way he would go about it is he would lace her food and drinks with drugs that would knock her unconscious. He would invite these men over, and while she was unconscious, they would rape her. The husband was not the only one found guilty when it comes to this. 50 other men have also been found guilty. It's fucking, I can't say it enough. This story is fucking crazy.
It's epic for sure. Like 51 men are convicted of raping one single person within a decade.
The court found 47 of the men guilty of rape, 2 of the men guilty of attempted rape, and 2 of the men guilty of sexual assault. And the prison sentences ranged anywhere from 3 to 20 years. Now, on top of that, as if that wasn't fucking crazy enough, there are still about 20 individuals who were never identified and are believed to still be at large. So when you're just looking at the sheer numbers, that's 70 people were involved in raping this woman over the span of 10 years. It's truly horrific. Her husband ended up getting 20 years. And while that seems like, it should be a lot more, which it clearly should be for the absolute horror that he put her through and the just fucking trauma she experienced, he's in his 70s, so he's going to die in prison. Regardless of the sentence, he's dying there. So fucking good.
Yeah, but I feel like I don't know a lot about French courts. I had to learn a bit for this episode. But I feel like in America, like, we give people like 6 consecutive life sentences to just prove a point. I feel like 20 is like, you might make it, 92, try hard, I guess. Like, in America, if this would have gone the way that it did in France, and I don't know that it would have.
Yeah, that's a big if.
It would have been like, okay, at least you get like a 20-year for this and a 75-year for that, and then 2 life sentences and something else. You're done. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter your age. You're done for good. Good luck with your appeal.
Yeah. One of the upsides to this, again, is that Gisele has sort of become like a folk hero to many people in France and all over the world, really. Many women spoke about how they were disheartened with the sentence of many of the other men. 6 of the men were allowed to just walk free from court. And in most cases because of the time they had already spent in pretrial detention. So that sucks. But she did, do this with the support of so many women and was really, as we said, a fucking hero to people across the world.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll get into that a little bit later about kind of how people are showing up for her and some commentary that she's made. But one thing that I thought was interesting is that when all of this news broke, I hadn't followed any of this. I heard of the conviction news, and I was starting to read up on it at that point. But it was weird because a lot of the articles didn't tell you how Gisèle found out. Because, like, as Rich was mentioning, he's like, there could be at least 20 more unknown. 20 more how? How do you know they're unknown? How did they know there were 50? Like, what's going on here? So the story of how she ended up finding out is absolutely bizarre, dumb luck, and she's so lucky that this one security guard person took their job so seriously at, I believe, a grocery store. So back in November of 2020, Gisèle was called upon to speak with police on behalf of her husband. At this time, everything was fine, copacetic, they were in a loving marriage, to her assumption. But he, and we're just not naming him here because, like, fuck him. So her husband at the time had been caught at a supermarket upskirting women, which is like, peeping up skirts, and then trying to take photos up women's skirts. This guy, 2020, he's like 72 now. So that puts him in his late 60s, trying to look at like random lady underwear in the supermarket. It's so fucking weird and like 1930s, like 1940s, like, I don't know. It's just archaic to me that like panties are going to get you off like that. There's a whole world of the internet, like, grow up. But anyway, so he got caught upskirting women in this supermarket and taking photos, and this security guard actually saw him, realized what he was doing, reported him. This whole thing went down, and when the police actually got involved, they decided to seize his phones and his computer, places that you would store photos. And when they went into those two different pieces of technology, they realized that there was a library of over 20,000 images and videos, which showed 71 men having sex with Gisèle while she was unconscious. That's how they found out. That's how she found out, was that he had been marking like all of this down. There was proof of everything. And then when they went further back into his history, he'd actually been caught upskirting women back in 2010 as well. So he's like a serial supermarket public place upskirt
So
asshole.
fucking weird.
Like, so weird. Once again, we also had the internet in 2010. So, like, find some porn. Don't be a weirdo in public. And in addition to the upskirting, the double upskirting charges and what happened with Gisèle, his DNA actually matched the DNA of a case where this unknown person lured an estate agent to an apartment in Paris back in 1999, then knocked her out and tried to rape her. So he has a history like a mile long, at least 20 years, possibly longer, 99, 2010, all the way through, I'm assuming 2020. So how did this happen? How did this happen to her? How did she end up getting unconscious all the time, right? It turns out she's in what she thinks is a loving marriage. Her husband's this perfect, wonderful guy. She actually kind of like referred to him as like a perfect husband type. And so this perfect husband from time to time would offer to cook her dinner and then make her at the end of the meal his famous raspberry and mango sorbet and send it with her as she went off to bed. And then she'd wake up in the morning feeling groggy and overtired and just kind of like whatever, but she just assumed, slept like shit, whatever, like, the perils of the modern day are, right? Like, you're older, you're above 30, your back's just gonna hurt. You brush it off. You don't think it's anything. You ate your beautiful, wonderful sorbet, you went to bed. So what actually was happening, as Rich had mentioned, was that he was drugging not only the dinner, but also the sorbet. And so he would send her off to bed with like the final dose. She would pass out in bed. And in the interim, before this was happening, her husband was meeting men on French swingers websites, one of which was in a chat room called, quote unquote, without her knowledge. Oh my God.
Ugh.
These guys, the strangers, and then the now ex-husband, would schedule a time for them to meet at the house, and then the guys would park down the street and walk to the house undetected and rape her in her marital bed after she finished her sorbet. This is so fucked up on so many levels. I mean, it really does unfortunately sound like a TV episode, but this is someone's real life, and it's so fucked.
Yeah, absolutely. I, again, keep repeating myself, like, it's absolutely fucking insane and horrifying.
And I can't even imagine, like, I mean, think of how she found this out. She called up the cops, or was called upon by the police, rather, to basically vouch for her husband, and was talking about what a nice guy he was. And that's when she found out that they had all of this information on him. She was basically trying to vouch for him, and then she found out, I guess, that he had a completely other side that she's never even seen before. That's got to be so off-putting and scary, and you have to be so strong and brave to go through what she went through. And there's a lot that she's done, and it's pretty shocking how she has been able to handle this and handle her emotions and not break down consistently, and just seem to be this kind of pillar of strength throughout the whole of her trial.
Also, once again, pointing out the fact that this is also someone she was married to they were together for 50 years.
And she had no idea.
And this had been going on for a decade. If it was happening for a decade, how long before that was he plotting this and planning it and thinking about doing it?
Well, he was upskirting people in 1999.
Yeah, right. And that's like, the level of betrayal is staggering to have a partner of that amount of time. Holy shit. So let's talk about why this is important, why this whole case is important and the outcome of it. To start out with, Gisele did something that was truly heroic and had to have been just absolutely frightening on a level unmatched. Talk to anyone who's been through a rape trial, any victim survivor, as they sit in a courtroom and have to look their abuser in the eye.
Not even sit in a courtroom. Be in the same room. Be in the same music venue. Be at a restaurant. I mean, anywhere.
Gisele did this and looked, what was it, 20-some abusers in the courtroom sitting there with her over the course of 3 months. Like, that's fucking horrifying. On top of that, she waived the right to her anonymity as a survivor and demanded that all the evidence be heard in open court. Again, extremely re-traumatizing. So it's amazing that she did that. In which, included the videos that her ex-husband had made of her being raped again and again by all these men. She insisted that the shame should fall on those who abused her and not her, because it should. She didn't do anything. She had nothing to be ashamed of, but easier said than done. But the fact that she was so adamant about that is incredible.
It's interesting, too, because that comment that she made about that she should not be the one who faces the shame is so simple. Like, it's so simply correct in my mind. If you got into a car accident and somebody rear-ended your car, you were parked where you should be, whatever, and someone comes and just blasts through a stoplight and then just totals the back of your car, you wouldn't pull up to, like, work or the auto shop and be like, oh my God, I fucked up so bad. If you didn't do anything and you were stopped at the light like you were supposed to be, or whatever the situation was, you wouldn't be holding that kind of shame. But if you transfer that over to a situation like this, to sexual assault, abuse, a lot of just trauma in general, you get that kind of weird imposter syndrome almost, where you're like, this had to be my fault somehow. I must have done something. And she just refused. She's like, nope, we're going to show this. You did this. I had nothing to do with this. And she didn't. She was completely unconscious. Yeah. She had no say in this whatsoever. And this is not any different than when you see someone on a college campus get roofied and have, a number of people do what they're going to do with her or them. It's unfortunate that in those situations, people walk away and end up being called sluts, whores, easy, drunk. It doesn't make a lot of sense. They were not mentally available and because of that, they should not have labels attached to them. Just like here. It's not her shame. She had nothing to do with it. So, like the Me Too movement here in the States, Gisèle's case and the trial has sparked conversations between men and women, partners, friends, on social media, in person, all over France. One supporter named Fanny, and forgive me because I do not speak French and I'm going to butcher her last name, but I believe it's Fanny Forest. That supporter stated, quote, "Some women are realizing, maybe for the first time, that their ex-husbands violated them, or that someone close to them committed abuse. And men are starting to reckon with their own behavior or complicity, things they've ignored or failed to act on. It's heavy, but it's creating change," end quote. Which is great. I mean, that's similar to what we saw here during the first part of Me Too, when things were actually changing and people were speaking out and speaking up, and we felt like there was going to be like a large wave of change, which there was some. And there's a quote from Laura Frater, who's a program founder and professor who studies gender attitudes in Europe, which I thought was interesting because it's so easy so many times for us to think that what goes on in our community, in our city, our state, our country is kind of what happens all over the world. But it's really not true. We don't really know what's going on in some of those other places until we speak to other people who have lived experiences there. So Laura stated that, quote, "While there is still perhaps more skepticism in France than in the US about the legitimacy of sexual assault and sexual harassment," which, side note, I can't believe there would be more skepticism somewhere besides the United States. We've seen how these things are handled, but okay, back to it. "These attitudes are changing fast, especially as a younger generation of women and French feminists and their male allies are willing to confront these issues head-on. The Pelicot case is certain to contribute to this trend," end quote.
But it's not over. These things, they're never over. 17 of the men who were convicted are planning to appeal the court's decision. Because of the structure of the French court appellate system, this may prove to be even more challenging to be deemed not guilty. Numerous judges and a jury of peers will oversee this trial compared to Gisèle's initial trial, which included just a panel of 5 judges. Louis-Alain Lemaire,
Sounds good to me.
said one of his clients, who was sentenced to 8 years imprisonment, was appealing the guilty verdict because, quote, "there was no criminal intention on his part," end quote. So let's be crystal clear here, because I'm sure there are already people who are like, well, these men didn't know that she wasn't a willing participant, or they didn't know the ins and outs of their marriage, and maybe blah, 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 whatever.
They were on a chat called Without Her Knowledge.
Yeah. So let's break this down. If you are planning to have sex with someone who is unconscious, no matter if you were responsible for the person being unconscious or someone else was, just you doing that, you're for sure showing signs of criminal intent. Don't fuck unconscious people.
Lack of consent alone is not,
Right.
That is not a morally right thing to do.
No. The right thing to do would be to reach out to law enforcement, or at least someone in some sort of power. We're not really clear France's stance on ACAB, if it's the same as
Like we are here.
have here in America. But regardless, let someone know what you saw, and I don't know, again, I don't know if this was a bunch of people at the same time, if it was one-on-one, if it was just one person coming in. But if you see an unconscious person, don't have sex with them. Tell someone else about it. Her husband could have been stopped if just one of these men had spoken up about what they saw. Gisèle's life would have been changed so much earlier and would have saved her from so much additional horror. Like, there's no other word for it, just horror. In addition to this, on top of everything else, Gisèle's husband is now being investigated for a number of cold cases from the 90s, including the case about the agent in Paris. Like we said, this isn't I just decided one day to start doing this to my wife. Of course, it was going on before this. And if it wasn't exactly this, it was definitely something. There's definitely more bodies out there.
Human beings by nature keep pushing the envelope until they get caught doing so. It's what we do in all different aspects, not even like getting in trouble. It could be for anything. And so there's no way that her ex-husband one day was like, I'm just going to hop on this chat room, see what happens. Oh, okay, now I have a plan. Like, with no preconceived notions, with no prior ideas. I mean, we know there were prior ideas. He was upskirting back in the 90s. Like, yeah. This guy has like a paper trail, or a photo trail rather.
Without her knowledge? Oh, let's click on this and see what this is.
Yeah, this might be fun. So while the facts of this case are pretty ghoulish overall, it's actually a huge win. 51 men have been outed for what they did to Gisèle. Many of those men are in jail for at least the next 5 to 10 years, and Gisèle's ex-husband will likely die in jail, like we talked about, for all of the destruction and the harm that he caused his now ex-wife. And other cases may be linked back to him, so there may be other women or families that may soon feel a sense of closure for something that's remained open for, at this point, could be 35 years. So we're going to leave you with a quote from Gisèle herself. She shared this speaking of why she decided to not be anonymous, but to speak out with her name attached to her story. Quote, "I wanted all of society to be a witness to the debates that took place here. I never regretted making this decision. I have trust in our capacity to collectively project ourselves towards a future where all, women and men, can live in harmony with respect and mutual understanding." End quote.
Enough is a podcast centering on surviving abuse, harassment, and assault in the music scene. To help get the word out, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. In 2025, we are interested in talking to teachers, authors, artists, activists, counselors, community organizers, and anyone else who is dedicated to making a positive impact in their music community and our society as a whole. If that sounds like you, please reach out to us at thisisenoughpodcast@gmail.com.